This week I've been doing a lot of websites for clients. As usual, there's a lot to go through, but one thing that kind of got me thinking this week was some mistakes that people make when building out websites or asking their designer or anything like that to build their website. There are a few things that you should take into consideration, and some of them, yes, there are mistakes. Some of them is kind of a guideline. At the end of the day, it is your own preference, but I'm going to go through some of these kind of mistakes or kind of guides when you're building out your website and things just to take into consideration. And the first one is the load speed of your website, something that you really do need to make sure that you invest in. Now, if your site is slow, people are not going to stick around. Unfortunately, nowadays, people don't have time to wait for a slow loading website. And when I say slow, it doesn't mean minutes. It means a few seconds. So when you're building out or getting your website built up, make sure that the themes and that you're using are fast loading. Now, I build all my websites using WordPress, and I use themes and page builders that I know load fast and have, make sure that your website loads faster. Now, one of the other reasons to look at the loading speed of your website is because search engines do take this into account as well. You have the Google speed test and things like that for your website, and they have that because it's something that they look at when they're ranking websites. And a website that loads faster than yours will always outrank you. Now, again, there are going to be other things that might mitigate that, but it's something to look at. And what are some of the things that could slow your website down? It can actually be certain videos that you embed on the website, especially if you're using them as backgrounds. Now, I know there are a lot of people out there with these types of backgrounds on their website, and it will affect your load speed. Again, it depends on how it's been implemented, but it can cause your site to have a slight delay. Now, it might not be something that you see, because again, it depends on your broadband connection. You've also got to look at it from a position where people might not have the 100 meg or the 1 gig speed broadband from where they're looking at your site from. You do need to take this into consideration. So kind of those types of videos, not optimizing images as well. So you've got the full-sized images. And when I say full-size, it's not being looked at for web design. So there are sites out there that you can load your images up to, and it will then compress them and make them kind of web ready. So they are not as large as they start out to be. You don't really lose any quality, but the file sizes are a lot smaller. And it is something that you need to take into consideration, especially if you do have a lot of images on your site. Kind of a second point is using the fold to hook in visitors. Now, this comes from the newspapers, when people were always putting the headlines and that above the fold. It's the same with websites. Now, some people might say that this is not as important nowadays because we view websites on all different types of devices. But it is still something that I think you still need to take into consideration, because it's going to be one of the first things that people see when they visit your website. If you do have any questions regarding any of this, please leave a comment down below, and I will make sure that I answer it for you. And again, if you're live, let's have a discussion around this, because I would like to see what your thoughts are about this as well. And if you're not live, leave comments down below anyway, and I will still make sure that I answer them, and we can have a discussion in the comments afterwards. So kind of using the fold, this is where you can use a clear and descriptive headline. When people visit your website, you only have a few seconds to kind of pull them in. And if you're kind of not utilizing this properly, they're going to look at it, go, and then go find someone else. Include your main call to action as well in this as well. So what is it? Is it to book a call with you? Is it to download a report? Is it to contact you? Things like this you can put there to make sure that people see it and they're taking that action with you. Again, include media to make sure that your points are coming across. So you can use videos, but you can use them as kind of pop-ups. So there's a button, click on it, it pops up, and it could be an explanation video, for example. The image that you might use as the background to your headline, etc. Make sure that it is descriptive of what it is that you're trying to do or trying to say. Now, the third point is reduce the choices to help improve your conversion. Now, this is kind of taking advantage of Hick's law. Now, what is Hick's law? Well, Hick's law states that the more choices an individual has, the longer they will take to make that decision. And that's not just on websites, that's kind of in general life. You go to a supermarket, for instance. If you're given a whole lot of choices for one item, which one do you choose? How long does it take you to choose the item off the shelf? If you've only got one or two choices, your decision is definitely going to be a lot quicker if there's 10 choices. And the same thing goes with your website. The more choices you have on your website, the longer it is that they're going to take to make that decision. And sometimes it might just be too overwhelming and they'll leave without making one anyway. What can you do to help reduce that? Well, if your navigation has way too many options there, try and reduce them so that, again, there's not too many choices for them to navigate through. When you are implementing a contact form, for instance, only use the necessary information that you're going to need to contact them, for instance. Limit the form fields. You don't want to have a kind of war and peace contact form where maybe you only need 3 fields: name, email address, and their message. You don't necessarily need their phone number. Yes, it's a nice to have, but some people are guarded and they don't want to give out that information. So have a think about the information that you're asking for when you're creating these forms. Focus on one call to action. Now, I have seen it on a number of sites where you'll go to a page and there's just too many calls to action. Download my ebook, contact me, do this, do that. What is it that you actually want them to do? Make sure that you only have that one goal on each page. If you have one main call to action, it might be to build your email list, so you're offering them a free report. Make sure that that's the only thing that you're asking for on that page, because if you start giving them too many options, they're just not going to click on it. Fourth point is simplify where you can. Keep it simple. There's a reason why there are certain layouts that you see a lot. If you're browsing the web, you might see very similar layouts. Now, why is that? One, it works. People use it, they see it, they know that it's going to work for them, so they go for that layout. But also, if you go kind of too far left field and you start creating this completely different layout to anything else out there, when people visit your website, they might feel a little bit uncomfortable because it might not be something they're expecting. They might never have seen that type of layout before. And it might just make them feel uncomfortable, thinking, well, no one else is doing this, I don't quite like it, and then they leave. So sometimes it is better just to make sure that you do have your kind of custom layouts that people see. It's a standard layout for a reason. But it doesn't mean that your website has to just be a generic copy of someone else's. You can still make it your own, just look at the information that you're putting on the website. You know, you're still going to have very similar layout, but it's going to be the information, images, videos, etc., and making sure that you're giving your potential client or the visitor a great experience on your website. If you don't keep it simple, what you'll end up finding is that your site looks very cluttered. Now, my kind of design philosophy when it comes to building websites is less is more. You don't want to be cramming loads and loads of information into small areas, because people will get overwhelmed by that. They're not going to be looking at that and finding the information that they want. You know, you just want to keep it simple, just so that they can see the right information on your website. Now, I see there's a comment that's come in. Let's have a look. This is from Mark. And Mark asks that his site is on Kajabi, and would it be better for SEO to be on WordPress? Now, no, I wouldn't say that. Kajabi still has all the SEO tools on there. Can you get other tools on WordPress to help with SEO? Yes. The one on WordPress that I recommend is the Yoast SEO. It seems to become a kind of industry standard now, and everyone uses that, and it does give you some nifty tools, especially if you upgrade to their premium versions of it. But Kajabi, from what I've seen, and I'm helping a client on Kajabi at the moment, they do have their SEO tools as well, so you can make sure that you have, you know, the right titles, the descriptions, and those are your kind of the main part that you want to make sure, kind of from a basic viewpoint. But it's also going to look at the content that you put on the website as well. I've seen some people where they're only putting kind of short paragraphs on each page. Is that going to help SEO? Probably not really, because there's just not enough information on there. You know, you want at least 300 to 500 words, you know, to make it a bit more substantial, so that you can put in your keywords and things like that as well. There are other techniques, you know, internal linking. So linking pages together, all of that helps as well. But kind of generally, you know, Kajabi will have the SEO on there, but it depends on, for me, it's going to be dependent on what it is that your ultimate goal. Because if you just have a kind of what I would call a static website, where you just have, you know, 3 or 4 pages on there, but you're not updating that information, Google are going to look at that and think, well, it's not that relevant, because the information isn't that regular. That's why a lot of sites have blogs. And again, if you're going to have a blog, make sure that you are being consistent with it. Not write one blog now and then another one in 3 or 4 months' time. If you're going to start writing blogs, be consistent with it as well, because one, your visitors will kind of get into that rhythm. But also it will show Google that you are updating the information on your site regularly. And then again, more people visiting that, it shows Google that the information that you do have on there is going to be relevant. So I hope that answers your question. My kind of 5th point is, you see a lot of sites using the carousels, sliders, tabs, accordions, and all that. And from a design point of view, that might look great, because you're not overwhelming people with all the information at once. But the problem is that people might not see all the information, or they might not click on it. Now, there was some data from Notre Dame University that showed 90% of clicks were on the first item, while the rest were largely ignored. Now, if you think about it, if you've got a slide of images and you've got five images, and 90% of them are only clicking on the first one, the other 4 are kind of irrelevant, really. So when it comes to designing your site, sometimes having all these fancy sliders and things like that might not actually be helping your conversion. And it's going to be dependent on what information you have coming through or being hidden in these sliders or accordions and things like that. I've seen people using them for frequently asked questions, where you have the question and then you open it up to see the answer. Now, again, from a design point of view, that might look good on your site, but are people actually clicking on it to see what the answer is? Now, the other thing to look at is prioritizing scrolling over clicking. So again, going back to the previous point, if you're having too many accordions and things like that where people are having to click through, they might not be doing that. So prioritizing scrolling. And again, this was a case study from Crazy Egg, which does the heat maps and things like that. So you can see what people are clicking on the website. So, they're going to have really good data. And for them, they went from a short sales page to one that was 20 times longer. Now just think about that. It might have been this long, and all of a sudden they've gone, even bigger on that. And what they found is that their conversions went up by 30%. So from that data, it's kind of showing that people prefer scrolling through rather than clicking. And possibly something that's influencing this is people viewing websites on mobile phones. People rather scroll through information rather than having to click through, because if they start clicking through, then they lose their place on the page that they were on, and then they have to go back, etc. If you're just scrolling through, it's a lot easier to do that than doing all the click throughs. That could actually be one of the reasons why scrolling is probably what people are doing rather than clicking on all these extra bits that you might have on your website. Have a look at your accordions and sliders and things like that. And is there a way of just putting the information on the page rather than trying to hide it behind the sliders and things like that? Now, kind of my last point on this, so number 7, is direct attention with visual cues. Now, people are using a lot more images and things like that on their websites, and there is a lot of stock photography being used, and unfortunately, because stock photography has been used so widely, people are kind of tuning out to those types of images. So if you can, use more personal ones. If you've got staff, maybe you can use some of them in photos. It becomes more relatable. People can see that it's proper real life rather than these generic stock images. But you can use images to direct attention. Now, what do I mean by this? Now, I'm going to show you an image, and this actually comes from a heat map. And as you can see on the left, you've got a baby looking straight on, but then you can kind of see that the information next to it is not really being looked at. Yes, people are looking at it, but maybe not as intently as they should be. Whereas if you look at the image on the right, you have the baby actually looking at that information. And as you can see, the paragraph next to it is now actually being properly looked at and kind of being digested. So when you're looking to put images like this on your website, maybe look to see, can we use those images to direct people to the information that we want them to read. Now, it doesn't have to mean that you have to have loads of photos of people looking to their left or to their right. You can be more blunt in just using arrows. You see these a lot on landing pages. They might have their bullet points of their benefits and their features of what it is that they might be asking you to subscribe to, but then they have an arrow pointing to the button. So you're kind of being drawn into clicking it and filling in your information. So have a look at these kind of cues to see how can you maybe implement these on your website to help people actually digest the information you might have on there. And if it's something that you're looking to actually properly look at and see what it is that people are doing on your website, I would highly recommend using a service like Crazy Egg, where you have these heat maps on your website, and you can then view it to see what it is that people are actually doing on your website. Do you actually know? Yes, you can have analytics, so you can see which pages people are viewing, but do you actually know what it is they're viewing on each page? Now, a service like this would help you a bit more data driven, so you can see what people are actually doing on your website, and then you can make changes accordingly. It could just be that you change one image, as an example here, change an image that you have that might be similar to the one on the left, and you change it to an image similar to the one on the right. And all of a sudden people might be reading more of that information that you've put there. Have a look at that on your website, and I'm hoping that some of the tips and the mistakes that I've gone through today will help you to improve your website. As I said, I want this to be a discussion. Maybe you've got other tips or other mistakes that you've seen out there, and if you have, please leave it in the comments, and I'll make sure that I answer those for you. So I hope that you've enjoyed today's show, and maybe you look to implement some of these tips and that on your own website. But again, please let me know in the comments if you do.